Hey everyone, it's 10 Types, and today I'm going to be talking about what's possibly my best format I've ever played in, and also one of the most special formats, I guess, and that is the Worlds format of 2021, aka the PogChamp format. It's kind of strange, or PogChamp 2. It's kind of weird. So, first of all, of course, during 2021, there was COVID, so there were not in-person events. However, Pokemon was at its biggest it's pretty much ever been by that time. So people were, of course, having online tournaments. So there was a tournament called Players Online Global Championship. There were actually two of them. There's one in 2021, and the second one in 2022. I'm not sure which was bigger. But those were two very big tournaments that were essentially there instead of the World Championships. This was not officially run. Pokemon themselves was not really officially running tournaments at all for whatever reason. They ran a few, but they weren't very big or really accessible either, unfortunately. So instead, players themselves decided to make their own tournament, and this ended up being the Players Online Global Championship, which I competed in the second one. I didn't compete in the first one because honestly I didn't know about it. Pokemon was smaller back then. It became really big though by the time the second was around, and so people played this format. In this format, the meta or the sets in the format were Team Up, which is the last blocky cards from the Sun and Moon era, all the way through. I believe this tournament ended with Evolving Skies, which is very recently came out. And so there are not as many Evolving Skies decks because it was very new. Later on, you'd see more Evolving Skies decks. And this was pre-rotation. So right after this rotation happened, and then the meta shifted actually, so many of the top decks were Evolving Skies based. But at this time, they were not. Let's just talk about the big decks in the format. I'm actually going to move this deck here. So first of all, we have Shadow Rider Calyrex VMAX. And Shadow Rider Calyrex VMAX is very powerful, right? It just has its ability that lets it accelerate energy into play, which is just good, right? Accelerating energy is always going to be good. And then you also draw cards with it, which is amazing. And then you do more damage for each energy attached to your Pokemon. A Psychic Energy attached. So you play tons of Psychic Energy. Glareon Articuno also got more Psychic Energies into play. And additionally, you had Gengar Mimikyu. Gengar Mimikyu was one of the best cards in this format. So it was a Tag Team GX. So again, you have 3 prizes, but it was a basic Pokemon. However, it also had an attack that says you punish your opponent for having less trainers in their hand, which is pretty nice, but at the same time, it was not like anything game-breaking. However, its Horror House GX attack was amazing. When it's saying your opponent, you get to like skip their next turn for your GX attack. That's not exactly what it said, but it more or less said that, especially during the early turns, allowing you to set up even better, get tons of energy into play. And you also have powerful disruption options like Marnie plus Path of the Peak, turning off abilities of Rulebox Pokemon, such as the powerful Dedenne GX and Shadow Rider Calyrex itself. However, you could then play Marshadow, which is kind of like the Pumpkaboo that we have, which actually was recent, but is better. Pretty much just very easily allowing you to get Path of the Peak off the field. This was just amazing, right? So you'd play this, and then you also had Reset Stamp, and people thought it was going to be amazing. Spoilers, it was not. People had Dark decks, which you could play Weakness Guard Energy to counter, but it wasn't amazing. Really, this deck ended up underperforming, but it was still very powerful, allowing you to get tons of energy in play, and was 100% the most played deck and most hyped deck. One of the other decks in what I consider the big 3, because it was a weakness triangle of what people thought were the 3 most powerful decks at the time, was Eternus VMAX, just dealing big damage, more for each Dark Pokemon you have in play, and also increasing the size of your bench. You'd pair this with other powerful Dark Pokemon such as Glaring Moltres V and Glaring Moltres, which put more energy into the board. Crobat V about a pretty strong draw engine. Weavile GX here, allowing you to move your Dark Energy around. Glaring 6 unit increases the damage to you, essentially. And then you also have Umbreon and Darkrai GX, which is a powerful tag team that if you have 6 energy in play, you just get to instantly KO anything. And you also get to like stop your opponent from playing trainers, which doesn't completely stop them, but it stops them a lot. Especially during late game now, they can't boss orders or anything. In this deck was pretty straightforward. Again, Shadow Rider and Eternus were 2 straightforward decks. Again, part of the big 3, they did end up being proven that they were not the best decks in format, but they saw lots of play and were certainly strong. Yeah. Now we have Urshifu VMAX. This deck has 5 rows of cards. The third member of the big 3. This deck This deck was harder to play. It also is the first deck we're looking at that has a notable new piece being Metacham V. But first of all, it focuses around, Rapid Strike Energy provides, if it's attached to a Rapid Strike Pokemon, which Urshifu is and a few others are, it's a water or fighting or two of both or something. Two of one, I should say. So you can pay Jumex Rapid Flow in 2 energies as opposed to 3. And that says you do 120 to your opponent's Pokemon, but you do have to discard all energy attached. And Gale Thrust does 150 for 1 if you moved into the active this turn. And then you can also attack for cheaper with Karate Belt. You can have basic fighting energy as well. You have this Galarian Zapdos V, which is kind of nice. It is notably attack against fighting weak decks. You're a fighting deck anyway, so it's not a huge deal. But it is nice. And we also see Metacham V, saying if your opponent only has 20 HP left, you just get to KO them. And then if any of their Pokemon do, you get to KO it. Take an extra turn after that. You can't do this forever, but you can do it. You also see Passimian here, Mew for Bench Bear, Passimian boost damage. Then Mew turns off abilities of GXs if they have any energy or any damage on them. So that's kind of interesting. Dedenne as well, the very powerful support Pokemon, and then the Inteleon engine made of the Sobble, which searches out your other Rapid Strike Pokemon, such as Urshifu, which is amazing, and Sobble itself. Drizzle allowing you to search for any trainer, and the Inteleon engine allowing you to search your deck for your different pieces, those pieces that let you whatever. It's the same thing. And then as Drizzle for any trainer, so you can get your supporters, you can get your Pokemon search to get your Pokemon. And then you also have this Inteleon, which pings and puts extra damage into play. And then you have the option to play all sorts of various versatile pieces, such as Tool Scrapper, Path of the Peak to disrupt Tower Waters, and Air Balloon, as well as Escape Rope and Scoop Net, providing switch and extra consistency. Ordinary Rod for recovery, Energy Spinner to allow you to search out energy. And then you see a wide variety of supporters as well. Echoing Horn recovers stuff as well. And this deck is still good today. Not the same build, but Urshifu is still good. This was possibly the best it's ever been around this time. Since it came out until the rotation of the Inteleon engine was when it was one of the big decks in the format. And really, it was never quite as good after that, I wouldn't say. But it was amazing at this point. And that's Urshifu. Next up, we have another VMAX, which is interesting and very powerful as well. One of the two grass decks. This might be I was going to say the best grass has ever been. It's the best it's been in quite a while. It wasn't ever this good since, after this. It was not. So Leafeon VMAX here, first of all, really interesting here. Grass Knight doing 60 for each energy on your opponent's retreat cost. Of course, this seems kind of bad, and now it is because there are a lot of Pokemon with free retreat or cheap retreat cost. But now, at this point, most decks either had 1 or 2, and then you can buff this up with Gather Mine and even this Absol to make it much higher. So you'd see Absol and Gather Mine being very useful, allowing you to buff up your opponent's retreat cost, or I suppose nerf it, make it higher. And now they just have all this massive amount of retreat cost, which results in massive damage from Leafeon. We see the Inteleon engine again making an appearance for its ability to search out exactly what you need whenever you need it. We see similar stuff again, and Leafeon V itself also accelerates energy. Mewtwo allowing you to recover supporters was also quite nice, allowing you to actually, very importantly, loop Phoebe. If you don't know, Leafeon was the deck that knocked me out of the tournament. It would be very sad. Stop me from moving on to the top cut, which was a bit of an L, but I finished exactly where I wanted to. I finished in 10th place because I'm 10 types, so I made sure to do that in the tournament. But Phoebe here says it allows your VMAX, aka in this deck Leafeon, to hit through effects. We'll talk about the deck I played, which actually was kind of involved zero skill, which may be why I did so well with it. But it was very helpful. And that is important. Part of the reason why Eternus and stuff didn't win because they didn't play Phoebe. But I'll get to that also. And then we see the same tips and tricks. We see Tool Jammer as well. Air Balloon, as I said earlier, I mentioned, it reduces retreat cost, though, which is bad. That reduces the amount of damage you do as Leafeon, so instead you play Galar Mine. And same ideas. We see Capture Energy as well to allow you to search your basics easier. We also see Crobat instead of Dedenne. It really doesn't matter too much. Next up, we have one of the craziest tag teams, Lucario and Melmetal. So just reduce the amount of damage you take for the rest of the game. And then you also have Zacian V and Zamazenta V. Zamazenta V immune to any VMAXs. That's the main reason why decks played Phoebe, to be able to hit through Zamazenta. Lucario Melmetal was all over the place, super annoying. I remember my father Uncommon Fossil play this deck, and it was alright. Honestly, the deck's pretty good. And then you had Zamazenta V, immune to VMAXs, and not an awful attacker. And Zacian V, a powerful attacker that also drew cards. You can also play defensively by bossing up your opponents and trapping them, healing Crystal Cave, which is a new card and a great addition to this deck. Metal Goggles, reduce the amount of damage you take, and then you have Mallow and Lana for healing, boss stalling, Lily's Pokédoll, essentially serving as a Pokemon that gives up no prizes, and then you had Coding Metal Energy to remove your weakness, Power Plant as more disruption, and then you had the really powerful Tag Call package, allowing you to search out 2 tag team cards, including supporters, Cynthia, Caitlyn, Mallow, and Lana, Guzman, Hala, which were all right, not amazing, but solid. Mallow and Lana's was quite strong. And then Lucario and Melmetal, just your piece to get you set up for the rest of the game. And it was very scary, this deck, because you just took no damage. Actually, not no damage. Some matchups you took no damage, some matchups you just didn't take a ton. Occasionally you couldn't get one-shotted, but that was very rare. Next up, we have Ice Rider Calyrex VMAX with Inteleon Engine again. So you see the Inteleon just being very powerful for just searching out cards from your deck and dealing damage. We also saw the Calyrex. By the way, Calyrex, it played a lot of Suicune. Suicune was just solid, a very solid attacker for quite a while when it came out. Just hitting for very solid damage. It's kind of like Palkia, kind of like Chien-Pao. Very efficient, though, not low commitment. You can use Melody to accelerate energy. Ice Rider then could hit big damage, could hit 250 for 2. Not like one-shotting stuff, but one-shotting Vs, which is quite nice. And yeah, it was just a very solid deck. You had Path to Peak for disruption, Cape of Toughness to make your Suicunes big and kind of hard to knock out. And yeah, this was just a difficult deck. I mean, it won the tournament, I'll say. So it's pretty insane, right? And it's pretty good. So this is like a deck that I never actually played that much. I don't know. It wasn't my type of deck, but it was very good. Next up, we have, okay, so this is an interesting deck here. I'm not sure what this card is. Oh, no, I think I know what this card is. Okay, so this is, okay, yes, I'm looking through the decks. Yeah, so I'm going to group all the dark decks together. There are actually a lot of dark decks other than Eternus, but Weavile GX, which is very powerful, allowing you to move around your dark energies. You can pair Weavile GX then with a number of dark attackers. I mentioned Umbreon and Darkrai, very powerful. Greninja and Zoroark, and then Mega Sableye and Tyranitar, all various things. This one could mill and like hit through and take extra prizes. This one just hit hard. And this one, as I said, took an instant KO and like stop your opponent from doing stuff. In addition to that, we see Mewtwo and Mew allowing you to copy any of your GXs from your discard, any of those dark Pokemon that I mentioned earlier. And then you see Red and Blue allowing you to evolve your GX Pokemon, not faster than normal, but allowing you to evolve them and then accelerate energies from your deck, which is quite nice. Then we also saw the Tag Call package, because Red and Blue is a tag team, as well as a variety of your attackers, Caitlyn and Cynthia, and this card, which is not loading, so we will not get to see this card. Oh, we do get to see this card. Let's go. Sabrina and Bryson, the most elusive card in the Pokemon TCG, I'll go as far to say. Because it was only legal for like a couple of months, I think. So Below and Bryson Man was banned for being too good. It was a mill card. So Sabrina and Bryson pretty much just searches your deck for 2 basic energy, and then you discard 5 other cards to search your deck for 3 Pokemon of different types. So that's pretty weird. But you have all these different types. You have the Sneasel, which is water. And then you have the Darkrai, like the dark Pokemon. You have Psychic, Lightning, stuff like that. So it's just kind of weird. I closed it. But then it was a weird card, but it only saw play in like essentially this tournament. But it was pretty cool and pretty funny. And honestly helped this deck out a lot. And then you just had other things. You could see this deck playing various other techs as well. But generally it would just go ahead and use Weavile and like power up different Pokemon and just kind of annoy your opponent. And then eventually win, because you can have these very powerful parts of the game with the end game where you accelerate lots of energy, do big attacks, and just overwhelm your opponent. This was a deck that was strong, but again, it wasn't the best deck. And then we come to another deck that was, which deck was this? Some of the decks get kind of like grouped together. This deck is Mutomio. Okay, I was going to say, what did they call this deck? Because this is Mutomio. Again, we see dark pieces, we see Moltres, but we don't see the Weavile. We do see ADP, but we'll talk about that later. This was the deck that came second. That was definitely a surprise. This is Greninja GX, hits through effects. Very important, by the way. Mawile GX, powerful. But we see the dark aspects and the ADP aspects, which we'll talk about in a second. But you had various routes you can go down this deck. Gengar Mimikyu I mentioned earlier. Pretty much you could just go in with all these various attackers. Vileplume is a solid one. This focuses around Aurora energy, allowing you to use any type of energy, any type of attacker, Mewtwo, switch it up and do anything you want in any game. It was really very powerful and very difficult to deal with. Honestly, this was one of the coolest decks in the game, and the kind of deck that like I look up to and say, this is awesome. This deck was really awesome. Kind of weird, weird to like play with and against and around and build, but it ended up being very powerful in the right hands because its versatility meant that it could adapt to various things. It was just good. Next up, we have everyone's favorite deck, ADP. So ADP just allows you to take extra prizes with your GX attack for the rest of the game. It says you take extra prizes. Ultimate Ray also accelerates energy into play. From there, you can go ahead and use Zacian V, which is very powerful, paired with Rusted Sword. ADP's damage buff as well, that boosts damage in addition to letting you take extra prizes. Then you can go ahead with basic Metal Energy to just start destroying stuff with Zacian. Additionally, if you want to hit Dark Dextra weakness, you play Galarian Moltres V. Additionally, if you want to hit through effects, you play Aegislash V. Again, hitting through effects, very useful. And then we see Galarian Zapdos V to beat those fighting weak decks, aka Eternatus. This does not have a psychic attacker, but you could play Mewtwo to hit the weakness of Urshifu. And so you could hit any weakness with this deck. Mawile V could drag Pokemon into play as well. Because I talked about Dedenne, Crobat, this deck even plays Eldegoss. There's low HP 2-prize Pokemon, and now they're low HP 3-prize Pokemon they can just one-shot. With ADP, you're looking to get as many of those in play as you can to just be able to win the game quickly there. Last but not least, this is the deck, the exact list that I played from a tournament, which I may or may not have decked from the tournament before, but don't worry about that. I played this deck, and honestly, part of this video is obviously me going over this format. It's really cool, but also part of it's me just bragging about how amazing it is. Now, this is 100% when I was in my prime, when I actually like tried in competitive Pokemon, and then the scene didn't show up, and I was sad. But in this tournament, I did amazingly. Around this time, I did amazingly. I was able to finish. I think I went like across 2 days. I went like 13-4 or something. I don't know. I did very well. Honestly, pretty much every game is an auto win of this deck, admittedly, but people just didn't respect it. I mean, some of the lists I show you did, but a lot of the lists did not play cards to hit through effects because regular Decidueye here says it does 90, 20 to 2 your opponent's bench solid, but prevent all damage done to this Pokemon by attacks of Pokemon V's and GXs. And it plays the Inteleon engine to set up as well. So, honestly, the most important part of this deck is dealing with the Inteleon engine, because Inteleon allows you to hit through this, but generally you're just fine. Against all those VMAXs, GXs, all those, they just can't get through it. So your whole point is just to wall them off, and then eventually you should be able to win the game from there. This deck's just really good. There's not too much to say about it, other than it just sets up quite well. Inteleon engine, stage 2 deck. This was like the best stage 2 attacker by far. One of the best grass decks we've seen in a long time as well. This is Rise my boy because he's completely broken, and just like completely allowed me to get exactly the place I wanted in 10th place. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed this video though. This video is awesome. Also, I might cover Pog 1 if you want me to cover that, but hope you enjoyed, and as always, I'm excited to see you next time. See ya.